you don't really know the level of development one goes through when something bad happens. So who's to say that he would have progressed and developed the way he did had he not been fired from Citi? And the other side of it is, you just don't know who you have at a particular moment in time. And everybody progresses and, they make changes and improvements.
Larry Ellison is a complete opposite of Tim Cook. Larry Ellison is a brash, like 1980s kind of. Larry Ellison's like a refined Trump, he's not as hardcore. He's I put them in the same group. He's yachting all the time, that big male ego and all of that. Mm-hmm. Tim Cook is a homosexual male who's very reserved, very calm and collected, very by the numbers.
Let's just say, for example, you are in Google's board meeting and you rely on open source information to get real-time data. And if you need that to help you be a more informed board member, I think it's a great device and a tool. But in another context, having a phone is more of a distraction.
How much business smarts or business acumen are people even getting educated? Like you say, be prepared. Like, how much of that goes hand in hand with your business world experience or your education you got or how you were brought up versus how someone could just naturally know your numbers. Like everybody should know your numbers, or come to a meeting prepared, have your be on time. Don't be late. If you're early, or if you're on time, you're late, right? That whole way of thinking. How does that get taught, or are people even getting educated like that? Because I feel almost like in today's society or today's world, most people, working age people in their 20s or even their early 30s today, they have no clue.
When you try to replicate elements of a company that you don't have the capacity, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the skills to be able to replicate that, you're going to attract B-level players. And so when you think about just that overall mentality about the difference, not all organizations have the capacity to attract A-level players. And so what happens is you have C-level players are not the ones that are the biggest threats. It's the B-level players, because they're the ones that are ambitious, but they're late.
Now that I've looked back at it, I can tell you I lost so many sales teams that could have been, and I lost so many great sales people or leaders because I was trying to appease C's and B's. And those A's ultimately left because they weren't given the environment to be killers in, right? I think that poses the argument for why DEI is so dangerous, because you put people where they don't really belong. So it has good merit, but again, you're putting people where they don't belong.
What has happened, which gives your perspective merit, is that DEI began to shift into something that it never should have shifted into, which is giving unqualified people access to institutions and jobs and leadership positions that had no business being there. What has happened, which gives your perspective merit, is that DEI began to shift into something that it never should have shifted into, which is giving unqualified people access to institutions and jobs and leadership positions that had no business being there. Right now, the swamp is running amok with gook and dysfunction and bad behavior and all of the negative elements that politics brings right now. It exists there. And so this is a real opportunistic time by releasing those files to begin to drain that swamp. The Democrats don't have a platform. They don't have a message. They don't have an identity. They don't stand for anything because they can't get unified on any message. And until that happens, the Republicans are going to continue to run and mop them all over the floor.
So every single day that the DNC goes into wherever they go, right, to talk about DNC stuff, I don't know what they do or how they do it, right? They need to play Bonnie Taylor. This is what they need to play all the time. They need a hero, baby.
I need a hero.
Holding out, baby. Bonnie Tyler.
That's right.
They need to play that every day because that's the problem. They don't have one.
For the monthly savings of a 50-year versus a 30-year is about $745. So for a month. So for the uninformed buyer, they're going to say, oh man, that's awesome. I'm going to go for that, right?
Welcome to the Family Office, planning for the people who matter most.
Seen this, interestingly enough.
Mm-hmm.
Your perspective on it real quickly. Jamie Dimon, which is the CEO of
Chase, right?
Morgan Chase, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that he used to be, I knew he was, but I didn't know he was both. I knew he was the president, but I didn't know he was the COO of Citigroup. And he was doing a sales meeting or a sales recruiting or something at his house, and then he goes to the office and then he gets fired. They said by Citigroup.
Really?
Isn't that crazy?
That's nuts. I didn't know that.
What do you think about that turn of events, considering if you're Citigroup now or Citibank now? I mean, obviously Citigroup's not dying and they're not struggling, but to think at one point that was your president and your COO, who now is the CEO of the world's largest, most successful banking operation. You
know, that old adage, hindsight is 2020. But yes. I look at it two different ways, because on the one hand, you don't really know the level of development one goes through when something bad happens. So who's to say that he would have progressed and developed the way he did had he not been fired from Citi? And the other side of it is, you just don't know who you have at a particular moment in time, and everybody progresses, and they make changes and improvements, and so hindsight's 2020. Now, had they gone out of business, that'd be another thing, but you just never know. Maybe Chase is doing well because of the product market fit and his personality in that place. Because like for example, would Jim Cook be good at Oracle?
Tim Cook?
Tim Cook. Yeah. Would Tim Cook be good at Oracle?
It's interesting because Larry Ellison is a founder and he's still the CEO.
Right.
So that's interesting because that doesn't happen very often, but I don't think so, because Larry Ellison is a complete opposite of Tim Cook. Larry Ellison is brash, like 1980s kind of. Larry Ellison's like a refined Trump, he's not as hardcore. He's I put them in the same group. He's yachting all the time, that big male ego and all of that. Tim Cook is a homosexual male who's very reserved, very calm and collected, very by the numbers. Actually, Apple has just, interestingly enough as well, has just ramped up their efforts for succession planning for Tim Cook.
Interesting.
I don't know if you know that or not. Recently.
I did not know that.
I think
he's getting up there.
I think Apple's put themselves, in a very nice position. And that position, I think, is that they have not spent nearly the amount of money that their competitors have spent on AI research and development. So they still have a ton of cash. And they now almost have gotten themselves in a position where if there is a bubble, like most people say there's a bubble, I think that Apple's going to come out of this going, well, now we've seen all the mistakes of everybody, and now we have a ton of cash and we can pivot a lot faster. So I think that goes hand in hand with the board's strategy now to all of a sudden ramp up efforts for succession planning, because we've talked about this before. Tim Cook is a phenomenal executive.
He's operator.
But he's an operator. He is a president. He is a COO, but he is not a CEO. He is not a visionary. He's not, and that clearly shows you in, the lack of Apple's innovation or their level. But I think Apple has put themselves in a very good position to slingshot into the next, 50 years with some type of crazy stuff. But the reason why we're talking about Jamie Dimon is he just recently came out and said he does not, or he bans cell phones tablets, anything in boardroom meetings, no devices. And the counter to that was IBM CEO Arvind Krishna said the exact opposite. He welcomes it. So I was curious to know, opening up, interesting enough, your argument on that. Zero stance policy on devices in boardroom meetings. I think it's a great thing. I agree with it. I don't think there should be any devices in boardroom meetings or high stakes meetings like that. I agree. What's your perspective on it?
I would say it depends on the type of company that you're in a board meeting. Because the reason why I say that is because let's just say, for example, you are in Google's board meeting and you rely on open source information to get real time data. And if you need that to help you be a more informed board member, I think it's a great device and a tool. But in another context, having a phone is more of a distraction. And so I just think it depends. But I would say as a general rule of thumb, if I had to choose one or the other, I would lean more towards not having it because I want my board members present. And I want them to be focused and dialed in on what we're talking about. And I also want them to come in prepared and know what it is that they're supposed to be talking about if they have talking points and have a thought and have an opinion about something because they've read it before. And interestingly enough, I have a board meeting this afternoon for a company that I'm the board president over. And one of the big pet peeves that I have, not of this company, but of other boards that I've been a part of, is people coming to board meetings unprepared. Don't look at your notes for the first time during the meeting. Don't formulate an opinion in real time. Have some time to go and prepare. Like for every time we get together, I don't have it on screen, but I always come prepared. Like I know that we'll have other topics because information flows so quickly and so freely. But if it's a topic that we've talked about before, I've done my homework. And so, having a phone in a board meeting could serve as a crutch to allow people that come unprepared to squeeze by. And so as a general rule of thumb, I say leave them out.
But how does that, how does that not, or I guess rather, I mean, given your experience in life, and I could just reflect on my own experience in life, being in, having a office job, I guess, or however you could say that, and having my dad wasn't a blue collar guy; he was a white collar, but he knew how to do blue collar stuff, and I think that's indicative of baby boomers. I think a lot. My dad was born in '47, so I think that's a characteristic. So obviously, I grew up watching that. I'm not a blue collar person. I'm not motivated to be it, but I'm very mechanically inclined. I know how to fix a lawnmower, do an oil change. I know how to do these types of things. Now, watching that and then going into the business world as soon as getting out of high school, you learn skills like email and business, business acumen or business procedures and protocols. How much of that can be attributed to skill sets where today, how much business smarts or business acumen are people even getting educated? Like you say, like be prepared. Like how much of that goes hand in hand with your business world experience or your education you got or how you were brought up versus how someone could just naturally know your numbers. Like everybody should know your numbers or come to a meeting prepared. Have your be on time. Don't be late. If you're early or if you're on time, you're late. Right? That whole way of thinking. How does that get taught, or are people even getting educated like that? Because I feel almost like in today's society or today's world, most people, working age people in their 20s or even their early 30s today, they have no clue as to any of that. They just don't know. But then on the other side of it, you do have this group that seems very savvy tech-wise, and they're on TikTok or they know how to do business and stuff like that. So. But then when you actually see it in the real world, you're like, what the hell is going on with it? Or am I in a time warp with it? Because it makes me think very, very critically when you just said that about being on time for the board meeting and being prepared with your notes. And I'm going, how much of that is taught versus how much of that is caught? Right?
Yeah. I think that it's a very interesting generational divide as it relates to overall mindset and preparedness. And so what I mean by that specifically is that when you're talking about being prepared in a business sense, most of what you're talking about is caught. But unfortunately, there are a lot of cultures, business cultures, that don't have that learning type of a mentality and those high standards. I think there's more of a laissez-faire. We want to create a festive type of an environment. And so when you've got a festive environment, typically in general, you don't have high standards. And so when you look at companies like Google, they have a laissez-faire environment, but they also have high standards. And that's why they're a unicorn company. So you can't look at a company like Google and try to reproduce that, because they're a 1 in a billion company. And so when you try to replicate elements of a company that you don't have the capacity, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the skills to be able to replicate that, you're going to attract B-level players. I was watching a podcast, and there was a lady that was talking about A-level versus B-level versus C players. And essentially what she was saying is that A-level players, they want to be challenged. And when we're talking about challenge, we're talking about by leadership to help them get better. They don't want to be in an environment where they're comfortable. But B-level players, they want to be safe, and C-level players want to be invisible. And so when you think about just that overall mentality about the difference, not all organizations have the capacity to attract A-level players. And so what happens is you have C-level players are not the ones that are the biggest threats. It's the B-level players, because they're the ones that are ambitious, but they're lazy. I remember us talking and having a conversation. I don't remember if it was on the podcast or not, but you talked about that. Ambitious people that are lazy, that don't want to put in the work and the time and the effort. Those are the biggest threats. Exactly. And I think what's happening is that there are a lot of B players that think they're A players, because everybody wants the success. Everybody wants significance. Everybody wants to have impact at some time. One of those, impact might be their primary driver. Significance might be their primary driver. But at the end of the day, if you're not willing to put in the time, effort, and hone your craft, you're not going to ever be an A player. And it's being an A player is not all that it's cracked up to be in terms of what it actually takes. It looks great from the outside, but on the inside, when you're the one experiencing the difficulty of that progression towards becoming an A player, people on the outside don't see that. So to answer your question, Chris, I just think that a lot of organizations don't attract A players, and they don't have an A-level culture. So therefore, most of what happens needs to be self-taught or become a part of an organization where you can catch it, because that organization has high standards.
I almost think, like, when I hear that discussion, it almost to me is a complete argument for why DEI was so evil and so dangerous, in my opinion, anyways. Because,
interesting.
And I know we're not even supposed to talk about this today, but because that forces people or forces people into positions where they didn't do what they needed to do to get to develop, right? Or to develop those skills, or hone those skills, or go after it, or study. I just think of it in this way, where you're talking about A-level players. It's in C and B players, and you're categorizing all of them. And I'm going, it sounds exactly like, and if you've read leadership books, or you've been in a sales environment or a team environment, or you've built teams, now that I've looked back at it, I can tell you I lost so many sales teams that could have been. And I lost so many great sales people or leaders because I was trying to appease C's and B's. And those A's ultimately left because they weren't given the environment to be killers in, right? So that's kind of almost like me DEIing, like, oh, we got to give these guys a chance because, right? But in reality is that if I would have looked at it more pragmatically, and I would have went, look, we're an equal opportunity employer, right? Or equal opportunity, opportunity. We're an equal opportunity, right? So I'm not going to force these people out, but I'm going to make it known to cater to these types of people. And what's interesting about that, Len, is I would say my best years running a team like that in a sales team environment, my best years, meaning, and when I say best, I'm quantifying that in results, like measurable results for that specific type of business that would matter. Like, for example, your profit to, your P&E ratio or something like that, or your enterprise value or your gross sales or whatever. Those were my most successful years were those years where I shifted my culture and went and became more attuned and more aggressive in catering towards those types of people, types of what you described, more so than making it more inclusive. And I did lose some people that were with me for a while that were C's and B's, but I gained new A's. and I will say that made the ones that I had go even more and gave me some that I didn't even know I had. So I think that poses the argument for why DEI is so dangerous, because you put people where they don't really belong.
So
it has good merit, but again, you're putting people where they don't belong. You're sticking somewhere where they're not even equipped to handle that type of situation. It's like giving someone it's like giving a 50-year-old man who's only made $80,000 a year salary. It's like giving them $1 million salary. It's a crash and burn society. It's like a lottery winner, right?
So, okay. I would say I agree with 90% of your points. And so let me start off with what I agree with. And then I want to talk to you about our point of divergence, so then we could get back on the same page so you understand where I'm coming from. So what I agree with you about is the importance of having an environment of high standards. What I agree with you about is having an environment where you attract the best players. What I agree with you about is having an environment where you hold people to the highest standard possible to have a successful organization, regardless if you're in sales, if you're in the corporate setting, regardless of those things. Our point of divergence is this notion of DEI. And so I want to make sure that you and I have a common definition of it, so that so that we're both operating from the same definition. So historically, the beginning and the genesis of DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, was because there were groups of people that weren't given equal access to be a participant in different job, or different leadership positions or things like that. And so there were certain rules that were created to give other people access. So in my case, what I'm talking about are, people of color and women. And so what happened is, when you open up an opportunity for people who didn't have access, the goal is to attract people who are uniquely qualified to carry out those positions with the same level of expertise, with the same level of knowledge and information to be able to do that job. What has happened, which gives your perspective merit, is that DEI began to shift into something that it never should have shifted into, which is giving unqualified people access to institutions and jobs and leadership positions that had no business being there. And so what ends up happening is that it becomes a very slippery slope between blaming a female or a person of color for getting access to a certain job or access into a certain institution that was qualified, and then suggesting that they weren't qualified, because of the fact that there have been many instances in which people of color and women were given access that weren't qualified. And so for the purpose of our conversation, always moving forward, whenever I say, that DEI is not a bad thing, I'm talking about DEI from the standpoint of giving a person who would not have had an opportunity access. I'll give you a specific example, because a lot of people in our audience would know who this person is. There's a person by the name of Mike Tomlin. He is the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so there was a rule in the NFL called the Rooney Rule. And what they said is, look, for every position and every coach that's hired, you need to make sure that you interview at least one African American, because one, the NFL is 60% African American in terms of the players. And then two, when you look at the coaching staffs, they're almost not, African Americans are almost non-existent. Now, we're not saying that the person that interviews has not qualified should get the job. Just give them the opportunity. So Mike Tomlin goes in and he interviews for this job and he blows the other coaches out of the water. Right now, he and I believe John Harbaugh are the two longest continuously tenured coaches in the entire NFL. And so because of that rule, he may not have even gotten a shot because he was a young guy. He came in the league at 37. By the time he was 39, he won a Super Bowl. Now, he hasn't won one since, but that's another conversation for another day. But he was given access. And so when I talk about DEI, I'm talking about situations in which you give people that are qualified the opportunity. So DEI in and of itself is a great thing. DEI misused is a problem because overall, then you begin to attract B and C players when in fact, that's not what institutions would be that are wise would continue to do.
And we're on the same pages in regards to that, which obviously undoubtedly we both know, because that's just like, you can't lend to someone because of their race. You can't lend differently to someone because
correct.
That, right. It's the whole issue I have with the transgenderism in sports, which by the way, Olympics we talked about that, I think, right? Or we might have talked about that, or we might, I think.
Briefly, we talked about it. Yeah.
Right. Because they're now allowing that, which undoubtedly so. There are biological things that make men different from women. So we're on the
100%.
And what you notice, I think, with the DEI stuff today is you did see that abuse, the blatant abuse of it, where you have people in positions where they have no business being in those positions. And sometimes they don't even want to be in those positions. They don't. They'd be better off served somewhere else. So yeah, rejecting someone because of their ability to do, or rejecting the best candidate simply because they don't read the right skin color, or accepting a candidate because they're the right. And this goes beyond skin color. It could be anything. It's just absolutely atrocious because it goes against that principle of everything, of evolution, of the success and everything. Like if you put the time in, the effort in, this is the result that should happen, right? These are the odds that it should happen this way. And then when you start tinkering with that, that's when you get the issues that you see today. And that's why you see a lot of resentment with certain things, and you see a lot of people that are just not happy. They're just not happy.
Right.
All this infighting. But to deny someone access simply because of that, absolutely not acceptable. But to put someone there is equally unacceptable. It's
100%. Could not agree with you more.
And that's where I think you see that with going back to that broader sense of things, how we described it. But getting into things today, Mandami is elected. It's going back and forth. It's pretty crazy going on right now. It's interesting because I don't know if you saw this or not, but Kevin O'Leary, he just did a conversation. I think it was with Varney. I think it was on Varney and Co. And Kevin O'Leary and him were talking, and Varney was saying, "Oh, the people are going to start leaving." And Kevin O'Leary went, "By contrast, what are you talking about? You're going to see an influx of people coming in. You're going to see an influx because you're going to have people that are going to appeal to his message that are going to move to New York City." And then Bill O'Reilly just recently was on talking about it. He's like, "I'm so happy my property value in the next county over, Suffolk County, outside of New York State city jurisdiction, went up by 20 and 30% already because everyone's moving there and wants to move there out of the city of New York." So he's got the governor on one side squeezing him. He's got President Trump on the other side. He's made all these promises. He came out with a message where I was hoping that he was going to be different and not say turn up the heat language, and put the gloves back on and just, hey man, I was hoping he was going to I don't agree with anything he says, like at all. I'm not in that camp at all. I agree with one thing that he says, and that is things need to change. Okay, I agree with him in that. How he wants to do it, I don't. But I actually was really rooting for him that he was going to come in and he was going to just prove everybody wrong. And I was hoping he was just going to put his head down, do what he was going to do, and play his game. But instead, he jumped right into the game with everyone else. So it's not looking pretty good for him right now. I don't know what he's going to do to get himself out of this hole that he's dug himself into. He's dug himself into a Trump-sized hole, that's for sure. What say you, Len Cooper? How's he getting himself out of this one?
I don't think he's going to. And this is coming from a guy who really wants to see change because he's young. I think we talked about him in a previous podcast, but, things have changed since he was elected. The things that I like about him is he's young, he is energetic, and he is charismatic, and he knows how to move people with his words. And so the thing that he has going against him, though, is that he is in a large state that's highly populated. And in order to get things done, he's got the city of Albany that he's got to deal with. And because of that, he's got different legislators, not only on the Republican side, but even on the Democratic side, that are not aligned with what he's saying because they say that he's too far to the left. And so I think in order for somebody to come in that has that charisma and youth and vitality and vision of what the future can be, I think you need to have more of a centrist type of message. I believe he could have won if he would have come in with the centrist message. I don't think he won because he proclaimed to be a democratic socialist. I believe he won because of all those other things that I mentioned. So to your point, Chris,
the emotions of it change.
The emotion of it, the messaging of it, his ability to articulate. He's a phenomenal debater. Like he has all of the goodies of a great politician. And my son was just telling me when we spoke last week that he went to one of the local churches and spent some time there. And people were really excited about that because he's coming across as a person of the people. And so that's really what people want. People just want to be heard. People want their voice to be represented in places that representative can speak on their behalf. And they feel like politicians aren't doing that. He's very good at changing that narrative. And so I wish that he would have been more strategic in terms of how he created his alliances, because he's not aligned with anybody. And because of that, you can't be a rogue politician without alliances. You can when you're on the outside looking in, trying to get to office. But once you're in office, the nasty reality is that you've got to form the right alliances. You've got to have the right strategic approach. You've got to be able to have friends in the right places to get things done. He doesn't have any of that. So I think he, in the next 2 to 3 years, he's going to be known as a person who talked a big game, but wasn't able to back it up with any policy and any substantive change.
Let me put it this way as I'm thinking about it. Okay, going back again to what we were talking about earlier. And this is like maybe we could have an interesting think about this. Does he have any business being mayor from a pragmatic, logical, effective standpoint?
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah, he does.
Absolutely.
So given that you just said he's going to be remembered as someone who talked a big game but didn't deliver, how is that a solution? Because to me, I look at it as he's going to be in the office for 4 years? This is 4 useless years that we can't get back that we need in a city that's very important to the country. Like the economic success and culturally, the influence. Like I remember when Giuliani got in there, and Giuliani got in and became the mayor of New York City. That was the last massive blow up of New York City. That was the last time New York City was New York City. I mean, think about it. You had Jay-Z in New York. Like that's everything. Like New York was New York. So culturally and financially and beacon wise, that New York served as the light of America, the shining star, the tip of the spear, the cultural influence of America. Capitalism lives here, success. And Giuliani came in and gave sweeping incentives for developers to come in and build. He killed the crime, made the safe streets, cut the taxes. He did the basics, and he came in there and he was a good executive, and he did what he needed to do to get the job done. And as a result, New York prospered significantly. Mandami has an opportunity to come in and do that, but given he doesn't have any experience, he's young, and I'm not saying experience in the same world where you get like Cuomo comes up and says, "Here, I have experience." I'm not talking political experience as a politician, right? Or a when a Nancy Pelosi would come up and say, I have experience being in politics for 30 years, or even I would hear Democratic voters or even Republican voters, any voters that are, sold out. They go to the conventions. Yeah, but they don't have the experience. No, I don't care about their political experience. I care about what have you done? Like, for example, if Jamie Dimon said, I'm running for mayor of New York City, please elect Jamie Dimon. That's what I'm talking about, Len. So, but we know Jamie Dimon is not a politician. He's not going to say the right things because what Jamie Dimon is going to say is going to be very unpopular for a lot of people, right? Because a lot of people are going to can't stomach what it takes to make JP Morgan Chase Bank, right? And that's where you cross that divergent in politics and reality, right? Like his business is about what? Matching reality with expectations. So that's where that divergence and that nuance comes in politics because you got a gray area stuff because you go, right? So that's what I mean. So Mandami is going to waste 4 years that we don't have.
Okay.
So given that, should there be something where you and I know this has been floated around, but this open elections are open elections. I mean, what is the only requirement you have is the presidential one? You got to be a minimum
35 and born in America.
I don't understand the 35 thing. Like, what happens? Do you reach like this point of ultra realistic ascension at 35 or something? Or because I know at 35, I have no damn business being the president of the United States.
No possible way, bro.
Len at 35, would you? I could be right. So and going back, maybe Kennedy didn't even have any business being president of the United States at his age. I mean. But Kennedy was very popular because when you see those things at Kennedy on TV, he was in the people and his hands out and waving and kisses and hugs. And that's what got him. And he was Camelot, the young, new, innovative, inspiring space age. That's what, we were coming out of the cold Dwight D. Eisenhower, strict, boom, 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 which is what got America through World War I and World War II. But we needed that shift. So Mandami could represent that, but he's so unqualified to do anything. And now he's gotten himself in this situation, like you said, I'm going to lower taxes. Hochul ain't going to do that. So and even if Hochul does push back, her lieutenant governor is going to come in and force a primary. She's not going to win it. And he could end up in even a more dangerous situation where he has Stefanik, who could potentially be the governor of New York. So
yeah, that's true.
That's what I mean.
Okay, so this is my optimism speaking. So before I speak optimistically, I want to talk a little bit about Giuliani because he wasn't the great statesman that people proclaim him to be. The one claim to fame that he has is that he lowered the crime rate significantly. And I think he lowered it by like 57%. Now, but, if you haven't, yes, but at what cost though? Because, there was a guy, Amadou Diallo, that was sodomized with a stick by the law enforcement. And then like a week or two later, then another guy, a Haitian person was killed by the police. It was like brutality, the whole stop and frisk thing. Absolutely not. Like if you go to China, China is one of the safest places in the world in terms of crime rates, but at what cost? If you have a totalitarian regime that's ruled by people that walk, with large machine guns and things like that. I'm not saying that's what happens in China, but if that's what it takes to create safety, lowering crime at what cost? Like, for example, what's the guy's name in Costa Rica? Oh my goodness. The president in not Costa Rica. I'm talking about
Venezuela?
Not Venezuela. El Salvador. El Salvador is it? El Salvador president. Yeah, El Salvador's president. Bukele.
Yes.
Very good looking, sharp, knows his stuff. People love him, but he has one of the worst prisons in the world, and it's it'll beat you down. Now, people would argue that that's what's needed because of the rampant crime and all that stuff. All I'm saying is that there are ways to lower crime, and you can do it in a humane way and you can do it in an inhumane way. Let's take that point. Let's push it aside. Let's talk about Mandami. Now, the thing that I'm optimistic about, and I'm hoping, and I don't know if what I'm saying will be true, but I'm hoping that what happens is that he gets into office in January and he uses his intelligence to realize, okay, what I thought and what I said were pie in the skies ideas. I'm in office now. I'm starting to realize that here are some of the structural realities of my position. Because I'm intelligent and because I'm pragmatic, I'm going to intelligently pivot because what I proposed isn't going to happen. And because I'm intelligent and I can speak well and I can articulate my points clearly, I'm going to explain to my constituency why I'm pivoting into this other direction. Because I think anybody who really has a brain can see, and who has some wisdom can see that what he's trying to do is not going to happen. So with Mandani, what I remember, what I'm thinking is that he's going to get into office and he's going to realize that his thoughts and his goals weren't realistic because he didn't know what he didn't know. And so once he goes in and reads the political tea leaves and understands that the coalitions that he needs to develop and the political framework that he needs to develop in order to get things done needs to change, I'm hoping that he'll have the willingness to pivot his perspective and be able to articulate that point to the people in New York City to say, look, New York is a big state. We've got a lot of people that are outside of these 5 boroughs who look at the world differently. And so I have to form strong, strategic partnerships with people across the aisle that I may not even agree with. And some of those across the aisle people are even on the Democratic side. And so in order to be able to get things done, I'm hoping he'll realize early in the game the need to pivot, as opposed to realizing that, okay, democratic socialism and speaking in a bullhorn is going to go on deaf ears. Once he gets into office and realizes that his ideas don't get done, because if he can't get anything done, then he's no good for anybody. So I'm optimistic that he'll use his intelligence to figure things out.
I think that he's going to endure a very rough 4 years, and unfortunately, it's going to be very ineffective because it's going to take him so long to try to figure out how that mess actually works. And by the time he actually even figures out, he might even be disheartened or he might have an Elon Musk moment. I don't think he will. I want to be optimistic, but I want to say throw him in the same camp as an AOC. He just wants to get in there, get some power, get some money, get some political ties, enrich himself a little bit more. I just think he's in the same camp as all of them. I want to think he's not, Len, because I want to, because I am an optimist, but time will tell. Time will tell, but my My percentage is that he's going to be on that side of just he's going to be try to be a government bureaucrat. I mean, because he doesn't, and I say that also because he hasn't done anything since, or I mean, he hasn't done anything up until this point. You know, he hasn't done a startup, hasn't ran a business. He hasn't done anything like that. He hasn't invested in loss. You know what I mean? Like that's a big deal when you're running something, because you understand what it means when you have skin in the game in something, right? Because to me, I feel like he still has a monopoly effect where and not a monopoly effect in the sense where he owns everything, a monopoly effect in the sense where he doesn't care if he loses everything because he landed on Boardwalk and you have 2 hotels on it and he's going to lose everything. He doesn't care that it's $7,000 to rent out your Boardwalk property and that's going to wipe him out. He doesn't care because it's not his money, because he's never really, I don't think, invested any skin in the game in anything. He's never come off a battlefield of business or life and gone, damn, dude, I walked away and gave everything, but I lost everything. And now I got to start all over again because he's not playing with his money. So I think that there's that effect there too. Now I could be completely wrong. He might've had some personal things he's went through, but so far as we can tell, he doesn't have any worldly experience that would say that he's even gotten a job and been fired. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I would say from the outside, people would say that about Kennedy, you know, because he was young when he was elected to president and people didn't think that he'd be effective, but he came in and he was wildly effective, which is one of the reasons why I believe he was killed. And just like you said, time will tell, because I wonder how many people before they got into office really came in with the right intentions, and then something happened along the way that tainted them. Because once so many people come into office and realize it's a rigged game to a certain degree, and there has to be a certain level of martyrdom for one to just stay true to who they are in the most holistic of ways, because I don't see it as often anymore. And so when you look at all of these lobbying companies, all these lobbyists, and when you look at these politicians that are in bed with the lobbyists, it's a very nasty, dirty game. And I just wonder to what degree will he come in and be impacted by that? Because, you know, at the end of the day, he's not a senator. He's not, you know, he's a mayor of a city. So I'm hoping,
a big city,
no doubt, and an influential city. And that means something. And so I think that he's uniquely positioned to the effect that he may not have those really negative outside influences trying to change his perspective. And maybe with his intelligence and his new perspective, he can really make some change and do something. And who knows what will happen. I don't think he's going to be wildly effective unless he gets in there, he realizes that he needs to pivot and he does it quickly. So like you said, time will tell.
I think that you know, speaking of rigged games, the government's back open. Everyone's happy about that, right? And I think this goes hand in hand with that, where, you know, he's going to come in and he's going to see it's enough, and he's going to see how things are really ran, the dirty secrets of how big things are ran. You know, I mean, all of them are all the big things have dirty secrets, right? I mean, it's just impossible. And the government's one of them. It's the biggest corporation in the world. I mean, look at it's the biggest corporation in the world. You know, say what you want to say.
Yeah.
But it just seems to me that, and this goes hand in hand, a lot of Democrats in the Democratic Party, or I shouldn't say the Democrats, I should say the establishment Democrats, I want to say they know it, that the days are numbered. I don't think it's at this point anymore where they could say, "Oh my God, they're taking over," or they're infiltrating. I don't think so anymore, because first it was AOC, and now AOC's in there. All the squad members are in there. Mandami's in there now. I think that what you're witnessing is you're seeing the change of the Democratic Party, just like you saw the change of the Republican Party. You know, the old school Republican Party is now dead. Officially, it's dead. It is now MAGA, alt-right, informed men. young men, like it has changed now. Nick Fuentes are in there now. And like, who would have thought in our today's world that a Nick Fuentes would be how could someone like that be influential?
Wouldn't have happened in the 90s. Definitely
it wouldn't have
not.
happened. It would have never happened. But he is now. So you're seeing it on both sides. But I think the Democrats made a very big strategic error with what they did with the shutdown. I want to say
I couldn't agree with you more.
They were using that as a bellwether, I think, and they think they got that false hope of like, oh my God, we won these Virginia, Jersey things. Those are false hopes because they handed the Republicans or the opposing. I don't want to say the Republicans. They hand the opposing side an opportunity to go, ooh, leaks. Now we can fix them. So it gives them a better opportunity to now have to fight an even stronger enemy because they exposed their game already, and they're still fractured. I'd say that one thing that the Republican caucus or Republican Party has in their favor, and I think that they're doing a good job of this right now is, and you're seeing it now even with today with the Epstein stuff. Now Trump changes his tune and release, go ahead, because Massey put the pressure on him. But what you're seeing is, and you see the Marjorie Taylor Greene split. I think what you're seeing is that the Republicans are going to be able to distance themselves by default faster away from Trump with the new movement than any other, than the opposing side, Democratic side, because I think the Democratic side doesn't really understand its identity yet. And they don't really know where they're going because realistically, what does the Democratic Party stand for at this point? We really don't know. We really, and that I think is their lack of message. And if you think for a second that they're going to put Governor Newsom in there as their saving hope, the only thing the guy's got going for him is, again, he's charismatic and he looks good. And those are great qualities to get elected as a politician. But as a manager, as an executive, he's terrible. I mean, he lost $20 billion for homeless over the last 5 years, and no one's even talking about that. And I don't want to get into that discussion because we could go all on that. But the government's finally open. There's a strategic error. Len, where are you at with that as far as the wound or any of that for that matter?
Yeah, I don't know if the Democrats will be able to recover from it. And let me explain what I mean. I believe, like we talked about last week, is people are over Trump. I believe that. I believe that as a population, the chinks in the armor are starting to get exposed, and you have a fracture between Trump and the MAGA base. You have very outspoken people who were very pro-Trump before, like your Megyn Kellys and your Tucker Carlsons and, your Candace Owens of the world and even your Joe Rogans of the world who are very, very pro-Trump. And many of them, to varying degrees, are starting to distance themselves from him. And so that right there created an opportunity for the Democrats to say, okay, there's a chink in the armor. There's a fracture on the other side. Let's position ourselves right now and make the right moves to be able to, over the next 3 years, get somebody in office. Now, I'm not speaking from my perspective. I'm just speaking strategy because, like I said, over and over, I don't have a dog in any of the fight. I just want the country to be strong, and I don't want it to be as divided as it is. But from a strategic standpoint, the Democratic Party was so dumb because they allowed the government to be shut down for 41 days, which is the largest amount of time in history, the longest amount of time in history. And for what? You have millions of people that were on SNAP that had their benefits cut. And you have all of these promises that they were suggesting they were running on, which was to extend the deadline of the Affordable Care Act, and make sure that the subsidies and the payments and all of those would be, continued on. And none of those things happened. And so you have 8 Democratic representatives that go and vote against their party. And they could have did that 41 days ago because there were no promises. There were no concessions. Now, we do know that there's another opportunity starting in January for, all of the votes and all of that stuff to go in their direction. But the Republicans never made any promises whatsoever. And so because of that, they lost all of the leverage they had before for standing out. And don't stand on principle and then go back and not stand on principle. But here was the last strategic error. And then I'll turn it back over to you. What I believe is they didn't anticipate the amount of blowback they would get when the SNAP benefits went out. And I think they started to look at what it meant for them politically. And those 8 people, some of them are not running again. So they have less political capital to lose. And so they decided to capitulate and jump on the other side. And I think that was a dumb move because they were very well positioned moving forward, especially for the midterm elections.
I totally agree with you on that. I have another interesting follow-up question to you, and I think they're going to do it. Will they make another strategic error in that they're going to and they're still doing it? And this is why I say they're going to do it. And I think they do it because obviously a lot of people do it because they want to make money. There's no doubt about it. If you mention Trump in any of your headlines, you're going to get likes, clicks, tags, right? We know that. But I think it's a foolish error for them to be spending any time whatsoever on Trump right now. Who cares? He's gone in 3 years. Like, they should be focusing on all of the down ballots, the people that could come after him, his cabinet, those. And they're not. They're still constantly attacking Trump. And look what we got on Trump. Like, when those emails got released and they highlighted those 3 emails, and that's all they have. Out of all these 20,000 sensational emails that got released, the only one...
You're talking about connected to the Epstein files, right? Yeah. Those emails?
The only ones they put about on Trump is the fact that, Trump may have known more or did know more about what was going on. Of course, that's why he cut ties with him, right? Which is just lunacy because I'm going, that's it? That's it? And then I go, why didn't Trump just release this crap? Why did he make it? He made it such a big issue for himself. But that's besides the point. The point being is, dude, who cares? Stop focusing on him, because if you keep focusing on him, there's nothing you could do about it. In a sense, he's a lame duck candidate now. What everyone ought to be focusing on the other side is the succession, right? The principles in the succession. That's what, and the general theme of, look, same old under this guy, you're going to get it with these guys or whatever. So no one's attacking those guys. And I think that's the problem that they're going to make. They're going to keep making it about Trump, and that's going to be their downfall again, why they're not going to be in the White House in another 4 years. I think anyways.
Well, okay. So there's 2 different points that I want to attack. The first point is the real issue at hand, specifically with the Epstein files. I think that is the one bipartisan issue that Democrats and Republicans can come together on. And even the Democrats could sit back and allow the Republicans to push that agenda forward, because Marjorie Taylor Greene has been on CNN, Fox, anywhere she can get a platform. She's been everywhere trying to promote this, because at the end of the day, any decent human being has an issue with the pedophile.
Pedophilia, yes.
Any decent human being. And so from that standpoint, the Democrats shouldn't spend too much energy and effort, because there's already building momentum, because, independent media stations and podcasts are all over this, especially the ones that talk of politics. People want to know what the heck's going on, because as I mentioned before in our long conversation that we had offline, it's the principle of the issue, which is right now, the swamp is running amok with gook and dysfunction and, bad behavior and all of the negative elements that politics brings right now. It exists there. And so this is a real opportunistic time if by releasing those files to begin to drain that swamp. So the Democrats, from a strategic standpoint, should allow the MAGA base to push that agenda forward, while, to your point, they start focusing on one flip side of the coin, which is who's going to be their candidate, and they all rally behind that person. And two, who do you begin to start attacking from the standpoint of their policies and their principles? Don't make it personal. Don't make it about who they are as a family person or whatever, because that's what they try to do to Trump. And I agree with you. They spend too much time trying to bash him. He's not running for office anymore. So it's a very short-sighted but effective strategy. It is effective to do anti-Trump. That's why they do it. But it's a short-term effective strategy. It's not long-term effective. And so I think that the unfortunate reality is the Democrats don't have a platform. They don't have a message. They don't have an identity. They don't stand for anything because they can't get unified on any message. And until that happens, the Republicans are going to continue to run and mop them all over the floor. And quite frankly, I don't mind having a Republican in office. I just want a Republican in office that upholds the views of the American people and really wants to push the agenda that American people hold as important to them. And again, I don't have to agree with them in every position, but as long as they're a person of the people and they understand the importance of getting the House of Representatives back intact, the Senate back intact, and the checks and balances between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. I want somebody who's more of a unifier, who begins to put all of those structures back in place, regardless of their office.
So every single day that the DNC goes into wherever they go, right, to talk about DNC stuff, I don't know how they do it, right? They need to play Bonnie Taylor. This is what they need to play all the time. They need a hero, baby.
I need a hero.
Holding out, baby. Bonnie Tyler.
That's right.
They need to play that every day because that's the problem. They don't have one.
No,
they don't. They do not have one. So
I agree.
They're stuck in that one. So
I agree.
All the games we played, which was over these subsidies, we're not turning on SNAP. Trump won. They're pissed about it. He didn't release the snaps, regardless of whatever happened. And we closed the country for a political stalwart and a statement in a political battle. And here's the thing that should piss everybody off. It only hurts the working class people the most. It only hurts the people on SNAP.
And the poor.
It only hurts the people that didn't get paid. It only hurts those people that are getting crushed already by the cost of everything. It's just, it's not to say that not everybody is. Everyone's getting crushed. They're just getting crushed and they feel it and it affects them every day.
And it's all over political gamesmanship. I don't like that when you're playing with people's lives.
It's so, but again, it's that's the thing. But don't worry, Len, because you will be saved by the 50-year mortgage. or the 15-year car note. I remember the day sitting back and going, oh my God, how am I ever going to pay off a 30-year loan? And now it's like, well, yeah, I bought my first house in 2001. I mean, that mortgage is like, if I would have stayed in that house is almost about to get paid off, right? And it went by so fast. But then you look at this and they're trying to propose a 50-year mortgage and a 15-year car note terms. And I thought it was crazy when people had 5-year car notes and 7-year car notes, right? And now you've got, and I think a 30-year mortgage is crazy because everyone's trying to get a 15 mortgage. I mean, the bank pretty much will own everything forever. This is kind of like, you have those, like in China, right, where you have like 300-year leases or whatever it's called. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I'm talking about. It's like 100-year leases or whatever.
You don't own land, really, not in the traditional sense, right?
Like you can here, which is why Chinese nationals love to come to America and buy land because they don't get to own land in their own country. Not to plug into capitalism or why it's so great and against communism or organized communism or crony capitalism like you get, but just kind of throwing that shameless plug in there for everybody out there. But it's very interesting to see that being proposed, I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be popular. I think people are going to welcome a 50-year note and a 15-year note. I think people are going to welcome that. And I think it's going to be a reality. And at the same time, I also think it's an opportunity to stall the traditional financial world and give it time to catch up, because when you look at new types of DeFi and Web3 and all that stuff, it moves so fast compared to traditional stuff. But what's your position, Len, on that? What do you think? I don't think encouraging people to get in debt longer like that is a good thing, but it just further signifies why debt is money in reality at this point.
Yeah. I think what's happening is that, like, for example, when you go to a car dealership, they don't sell you on the sticker price of the car. They sell you on the monthly payment. So unless you are a savvy car buyer, you don't know that. And you go in saying, oh, okay, I could afford $500, $600, $7 a month. And I don't worry about the other stuff. When you do that, you're not an informed car buyer. And I think what's happening is that when you look, like President Trump endorsed the idea of a 50-year mortgage. And I believe that he did it because of the belief that people are ill-informed about finances. Because if you go and you look at a 30-year lease versus a 15-year lease, by having a 30-year lease, your mortgage is significantly lower. But there's things that become very interesting when you compare a 30-year lease to a 50-year lease. I ran a couple of numbers. So check this out, Chris.
I knew you would.
So check this out. So let's say you have a $500,000 home, okay, and you're going to put 10% down. Right? Rough. It's a little higher than median, but that's a
good house. That'll get you, unless you're in Southern California, that'll get you dog house.
Yeah, a solid house, right? $500,000. Okay. So let's say you put 10% down, and on a 30-year loan, let's say you have a 620 FICO score. Okay. So with those assumptions, with those assumptions right now, this is probably a little higher, but let's just say it's about a 7.8% interest rate for a 30-year mortgage, because 620 is not great credit, but it's enough to be able to qualify. Like if you had an 800, you'd probably be around the high sixes as opposed to the high sevens. Okay. So let's keep that in mind. Now, and if you did a 50-year with all of the same assumptions, let's just assume that you'd be at about 6.25%. So the goal would be for a 50-year mortgage, you're going to get a lower interest rate. So therefore, theoretically, you're going to get a lower payment. But check this out. So for the monthly savings of a 50-year versus a 30-year is about $745. So for a month. So for the uninformed buyer, they're going to say, oh man, that's awesome. I'm going to go for that. Right. But the problem is that there's a couple of problems. One is that the cost over the full term for a 30-year. So remember, $500,000 home, you're going to pay $1,181,000. So $731,000 in interest for a $500,000 home.
That's crazy.
With lower credit score, right? That's for a 30-year loan. For a 50-year loan with those assumptions at 6.25, you're going to pay $1.521 million for a $500,000 home, and you're going to pay $1 million in interest. So you're paying 200% times, or 2x more in interest than your principal, just for the opportunity to pay $745 less per month. And so that's one problem, is the long-term cost of the home. The other problem is when you have a 50-year mortgage, what the banks need to do is they need to front load the interest up front, because on a 30-year mortgage, as it is right now, you don't pay off half of your loan until about year 22. So imagine with a 50-year mortgage, they're going to have to front load all that interest up front. So, most people on average right now, they move every 12 years. So the banks calculate that into how they create the finance charges. Well, the problem is let's say, for example, with the inflated or, higher length of time that you're going to have to pay off this mortgage, by the time you're ready to move, the house might be worth less than what you owe on the loan. So that house could be underwater. So while it may increase more buying in the short term, when it comes time for that cycle to end and those people want to start looking at other places, they might be underwater. So another thing, I don't know if you heard about this, Chris, but they're proposing that the mortgage transfers with you. Did you hear about that? So
I did not hear about that.
Yeah.
So if you leave the property, you sell it, you're still on the hook. Oh, meaning if you have a deficiency.
So so what they're saying, what they're proposing is that, let's say I buy this house for $500,000 and I stay in it for 12 years. And let's say I still owe, principal on the house. Let's say I owe 420 because 10% was down. So I started off with the $450,000 loan. Yeah. And let's say
because of the way the loan is, because it's 50 years, you're paying 90% interest. So
correct.
The value of the house hasn't swung up in favor of the principal borrowed, and you're pretty much screwed. And now you got to sell this because you got to relocate from Nebraska to Texas.
Correct. So in that situation, my mortgage would transfer over. So let's say I owe $420,000 on my existing mortgage and I go buy a house that's, let's say, $500,000. So I keep my same mortgage. I sell the house and whatever equity is there, maybe I collect. I don't know how that part of it works, but now I get a second on that other property for a $500,000 home. So the 420 that I owe right now plus the 80 for the new house. So now instead of having a whole $500,000 new mortgage, I'm getting an $80,000 mortgage as a second with my other mortgage transferring over from my other place. I think it's a terrible idea.
So in other words, what's going on here is that I sold my house in Nebraska and I sold it I financed it for 500. I still owe,
I financed it for 450 because I put 50,000 down.
For 450, but I have negative equity in it. I sell it. I end up having $20,000 left. I go and I buy a new house for another $500,000. I carry that other $20,000 with me on the new loan. So what you're saying is, or I still have to pay it. It's kind of almost like the mortgage companies got jealous of the car companies, car lenders. Oh, no worries. You got a negative equity? Trade that bad boy in and we'll roll your $30,000 in negative equity into your new note. So this car that I bought for $80,000 really isn't $80,000. I'm really financing $110,000 because I have a $30,000 from this old car note. That's
correct. Amortized over 50 years. So therefore, and then what they'll say is, oh, well, your payment's only going to be an extra $72 a month because you're rolling over that $20,000 from the other place.
Well, I mean, to me, it's great. It's a great news for banks because then that means the bank's constantly on the asset and they're constantly renting the assets. So to me, it's almost like socialism or communism. Right? But just in corporate communism. Because at that point, the bank owns the asset always, and the bank's constantly renting the asset out to Len, and then me, and then you, and then there, and then there, and then there. I mean, that's essentially what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just absolutely crazy. No one will ever own property at that point. Because the goal is to get that paid off as fast as you can. Now, the rule of debt is to have someone else pay for it, right?
Nobody from the middle class will own property.
Yes, exactly. So while you can save money and buy property and get property, get land, get property, get it, put it in a land trust, own it as fast as you possibly can. Now is probably the last time within the next 100 years. This is probably the last, maybe even 50 years, maybe even 25 years. This could probably be the last opportunity to own like property in America.
You know what? To that point, if I'm somebody that's like in my 20s and 30s and I've got some extra disposable income, what I'm doing is I'm buying land in desirable places. And what I'm doing is I'm going to those city council meetings and I'm finding out when a certain builder is coming to that area, like an Amazon or a Walmart, because they look at property projections years and years in advance, and they go and they buy the property before everybody else knows about it. So so with all of the technology that we have with fabricated buildings and all of the new types of innovative ways to build, if I have the land, then I can just pay for the materials and the construction as opposed to going to the bank that can decide the value of my home. So I would just buy the land and wait for technology to continue to progress and then look to build some type of fabricated home at a reduced price on that land moving forward. Because otherwise, the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, they're going to be priced out because did you hear? I think the median age of a home buyer now is like over 40 years old now.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Check this out. Oh, because we're talking about populations. '05 population change. So this is the population change across major North American cities, major cities from '05 to 2024. You ready? Here we go. Vancouver, plus 41. Seattle, plus 28. San Francisco, plus 12. Los Angeles, 1. Inland Empire, 21%. San Diego, 14%. Phoenix, 33%.
Wow. That's high.
Denver, 29%. Minneapolis, 23%. Chicago, 0%. Isn't that nuts?
Very interesting.
Because Pritzker's up there, that's why. Right?
Well, it doesn't help that it's cold and windy out there in the winters.
Exactly.
I mean, all those other places, they're like, temperate or warm weather areas.
I'm going to make an argument for that. You ready? Detroit, -2. Toronto, 37. Montreal, 21%. So a lot of people moving to Montreal and Toronto. Boston, 11. New York, 6. Philadelphia, 7. Baltimore, 12. Washington, D.C., 23. You know what? They got to move so many people there because so many people die so fast there.
Stop it. Stop
Len,
it.
that was for you.
Oh, man.
Check this out. You ready? These are the big boys right here. Atlanta, 31% increase. Tampa, 31. Miami, 31. Orlando, 53.
Sheesh.
Dallas, 43. Houston, 50. Charlotte, 93. What is going on?
Wow. That's huge.
If you are in Atlanta, Dallas, Houston,
Orlando,
any of that Sunbelt down there, it's just, people are just moving. So that's what I'm talking about. If you're talking about buying land, there's the spots you want to buy land right now. It's not the West Coast anymore. As far as Southwest Coast.
Right.
It's because look at that. LA, 1%. I was shocked by San Diego. Only at 14%. But then obviously
the prices though, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, obviously Phoenix, the draw there is everyone from Southern California is going to Phoenix. And you see that specifically in a lot of areas like Paradise Valley and what are those?
Surprise, Chandler.
Chandler. What's the other one that's really nice? I can't remember the name of it right now, but that's a really nice area there too. Scottsdale. A lot of people go to Scottsdale.
Yes, absolutely.
So, look, it's going to be an interesting week. It's going to be interesting to see, obviously, what happens there. I mean, we could get into a lot of things. I mean, we could talk a little bit about. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the media, the fight with BBC this week. I know we ran out of time today, but that's just damning evidence against the BBC. I mean, you got Rogan replaying stuff right now, and he's not even in that But you know what I'm talking about, obviously, with
Yeah,
the cuts and how
BBC and how they spliced January 6th everything and
So I
made it
think,
seem like he gave them like so. Just for those people who don't know, look it up with BBC. Trump, what they did is they took two segments of Trump's speech on January 6th and they put them together to make it sound like he told them to go storm the Capitol building, and so. BBC is under a lot of fire for that. So that's what Chris was referring to.
Yeah, and go look it up, go talk about it, because that's obviously par for the course with a lot of the media today and a lot of things today. So, and I mean, well, I'm sure we're going to touch on that as that develops here, because I think that this week's going to be a hot week for Trump, Epstein file stuff, vote. Congress is going to vote on that. I think it's going to go. They just voted that new person in, so they're definitely going to vote on it. I think on the Democratic side, but a lot of cool things going on.
I can't wait till next week, man. Next week's podcast is going to be juicy for sure.
It's gonna be juicy. We're gonna see. But like, if you like it, subscribe, do your thing, comment. We'd love to hear from everybody as well. But with that being said, Len, any closing final thoughts for you?
No, I would just say for those of you that are out there watching this, just continue to stay informed, continue to look at both sides of the issue. Don't get caught up in echo chambers. Be a thinker for yourself. Don't let somebody else think for you. Don't even let us think for you, because we're just talking heads on the media as well, right? But we just try to be more objective and talk about both sides. But at the end of the day, you got to go figure it out for yourself, because, Chris I know this is an aside, we're supposed to be closing out, but you'll hear like people say, hey, what do you think about Trump doing XYZ 1, 2, 3? And they're like, oh, I love that he did that. And then they're like, well, that was actually Obama. And then they'll say, and then on the other side, they'll say, what do you think about, what Biden did with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? And they're like, that's the craziest thing. And they're like, well, that was actually Trump. And they're like, oh, well then, so it's like, don't be such an ideologue where you just fall for just one particular person just because you like them. Think for yourself and care about the issues and really understand that at the end of the day, as human beings, as critical thinking human beings, our number one search as it relates to these types of topics is to search for truth. And so that's really what we try to do here. So with that being said, Chris, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out, man.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Be informed, because then you can have a much more intellectual conversation. And when you're right and you have the facts, you can burn people a lot better. And that's always good. Everyone loves a good relative burning. Thanksgiving's coming up. Yeah. Don't stay quiet. Create some chaos and some drama at the table. Everyone wants to talk about it. Look, you busted your butts to get to that table, right? And you busted your butts to put the food on that table. You might as well have a great civil, logical, independently intellectual conversation about it and say, that's right, baby, I got you. This one's paired with the facts, right? Be clean and eloquent about it. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you can all enjoy some apple pie or some pumpkin pie together. And then think about how you're going to come together as a family and just crush it in 2026. So, but anyways,
absolutely.
Always good, sir. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye.
Conversation has given you clarity on your next steps. Please share this episode with someone who's walking the same path. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. And remember, planning ahead isn't just prudent, it's an act of care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Family Office.